Hello and welcome to another episode of Father and Joe. I'm Joe Rockey here with Father Boniface Hicks. And Father, last episode we were talking about death a lot and the fear that I'm personally going through and going with it. And I think that I had a very natural thought for the times that we live in about it. And that was, well, if I could just have a preview about it, I think I'd be a lot more comfortable and a lot less worrying. Like you go to Ben and Jerry's, they give you a sample of the ice cream. I find out if that's the flavor I want. You go online, you can see any movie trailer in the world, see if that's a movie you want to go spend time to go watch. And you don't really get that when it comes to death, as you described there. Your bones can be left, and what happens with them will happen with them. But what does that mean actually happens to your soul? What happens to you? And I guess this is an age old question, but it's also one of the thoughts that I had. And sorry if I'm just hitting a cliche and asking it, but it's a real question and a thought that I had. So I wanted to share it as we're talking about the topic.
Sorry, I totally missed. What was the question?
Well, I guess my question is you're right. As I said that it was just a statement. My question is that right to have a desire to have a preview of sorts, to be able to want that? And if there is one, what is it? If I'm completely blunt to it and missing something obvious that's in front of my face.
No, I mean, the desire to see into the future is a very deep desire in us as human beings who are just faced with a lot of ominous things. We talked at the end of the last episode about how death stirs up fear, and having fear is quite a natural response to an enemy that we don't have control over, that we can't overcome. We really only overcome death through faith in Jesus Christ and the power of his resurrection. And so there is a lot out there. There are a lot of bad things that could happen. A lot of people have anxiety. This is Monsignor Shea at the Sikh conference back at the beginning of January gave a great talk, but he said there's a lot more anxiety. And, on the one hand, we say, well, it's for this reason, that reason, but maybe it's also because they're not wrong. There's a lot of reasons for anxiety. There's a lot of things to be anxious about, a lot of bad things that can happen. And maybe people who are a little more tuned into that are a little more anxious. And, that's fair. So if we had a preview, then we feel we could better prepare for whatever is coming. And, everybody who's I teach seminary, graduate students, and everybody wants to know what's on the exam. What's going to be on the exam, Father? And then I can prepare better for it. Okay. So I think that the desire to know that so that I can do my best, so that I don't fail, so that I'm not overcome, so that I can be adequately prepared is a pretty natural inclination. And then we want that in all different areas of life. I mean, you'd like to know when you invest in a stock that it's going to be the one that takes off. You'd like to know when you make a business venture that it was a good risk to take and it's really going to play out in the end. You'd like to know as you face the end of your life what it's going to be like, how it's going to play out. And a lot of times we'd like to be able to alter some of those processes as well. And that's another element of things. How can I change the outcome a little bit? How can I improve the outcome a little bit? And again, I think those are fair questions. To not have that is to require more trust. God does have that knowledge. Why doesn't he give it to me? Well, because he wants me to trust him, not to control him. And I think that's a really key point. And that's where we get in the Catechism's responses about superstition and various practices like tarot cards and other occult practices, rolling the bones or palm reading or consulting mediums or any of these kinds of things. The Catechism recognizes the unhealthy the disordered desire to look into the future, and even to consult to try to control the future and get some arcane knowledge of the future so that I can whatever prepare for it better, respond to it better. Rather than trusting, I'm trying to take, I'm grasping. And God always wants us to move us to trusting, not to grasping. And so that's where we're invited to in faith. And then he does also give some of that insight. There are people who have foreseen their death. There are people who have had some glimpses of what the future will hold. There are people who have been guided by spiritual gifts, by the Holy Spirit. And that's a great thing. But God will give it to us when we need it. He won't give it to us when the answer would be to trust instead.
And that's, I guess, faith in a nutshell, isn't it? If you really kind of break that down into one word. And I go back to something you said in the last episode that I think is going to be, not to be like your seminary students, because I was that person. Just tell me what's on the test, I'd be better at it. But you said last episode that this isn't an easy process, and it's not something that is meant to be easy in a certain way. Because if you think about any relationship that we have trust in it, it wasn't flipping a switch in most people's cases. Sure, there might have been some intuition where you felt safer with someone and had your guard less up or what have you. But that's still after a lifetime of experiences that you've had up to that point. But there's some intuition that I think I can trust this person for whatever reason. But then it's proving it over and over and over again throughout the relationship you have with someone. And I guess this is one of the challenges that we all have with God in general, is that he's not going to text us back. And there's a lot of times that we can put blame upon something or misread a situation with people that we already have the ability to communicate with. How many of us can think of, I received a text from someone that they actually wrote, but I interpreted it the wrong way, and therefore a situation blew up out of hand and not the way I wanted it to. That's, at least we knew the person sent it to us, versus just something that was unconnected dots that we connected in our mind, and now everyone hates me type thing, to go to a rudimentary example there. And where I'm getting to with this is that the nature with God is obviously different. He's not texting us. We don't have, God's cell phone number where he's just like, boom, okay, that was a text from God. He told me I was doing it wrong. We get told messages in very different ways. And to a degree, it's going to come down to learning how to listen and what to listen for. And I think that that's one of the elements of figuring out how to build trust and become more comfortable in this scenario. So to try to ask the question more plainly, how does one become more attuned to the equivalent of God sending you a text?
Yeah, that's a great question. Spiritual consolation would be one concrete point of connection with God. St. Ignatius lists a number of qualities that can be part of a spiritual consolation. Our heart uplifted above creatures, inflamed with love, moved with spiritual joy, moved to tears out of love for God, an increase in faith, an increase in hope, also inner quiet and peace. So some of those different movements of the heart can strengthen us. And Ignatius talks about that quite a bit in his rules for the first week of the spiritual exercises. And you can find that in something like Father Timothy Gallagher's Setting the Captives Free. But those little divine touches, those little affirmations at the interior level, the movement of the heart. And then I think we also see things playing out. I was in Rome, and I had somebody come up to me in a restaurant who asked it, are you Father Boniface? I was like, I am, yeah. Well, I've been doing Exodus 90, and that's been really inspiring for me. And I'm really grateful for your videos. And It's just amazing to see you here. And then I said, well, where are you from? Well, I'm from Switzerland. I said, oh, what are you doing in Rome? And he said, oh, I'm a Swiss Guard. Oh, good. Just a Swiss Guard doing Exodus 90 and appreciating my videos. That feels good. We have some things that, like, who could have arranged that? Or gosh, just today I had to reschedule something with someone, and he also had to reschedule with me. And we ended up actually ghosting each other, as it turned out, because he didn't get my email and he never sent me an email. But it's like there are certain things that kind of work out. Now, there's still a sort of spiritual consolation around those things, because I'm moved usually when I recognize that something particular has happened, and my faith is increased, my hope is increased. So there are a lot of little touch points with God that things work out, coincidences. So sometimes people say there are no coincidences, there are only Christ incidences. We seem to, things come together in a Christ-like way that points to the existence of God, and that he really is looking out for me in my life, and I can really trust him. So those are a couple of examples. Even being able to carry through, it requires so much grace to do just about anything. And maybe when we make a resolution, when we're able to love in ways that we wanted to love, when we experience interior freedom, when we recognize signs of virtue that have grown in our lives, a lot of different things that can point us to, the presence of God in our activities.
Yeah, that's so a lot to that, right? It's I guess this is the challenge of life, right? How to have the hope that we're going in the right direction, and that God will be there, and the faith that this is going to work out. And just this week and last week has just been such an experience I've never had before, I guess is the way I'm trying to say this, that it's even hard for me to draw analogies to it. It's like the first time you jump in water or whatever, it's weird. You don't know what you're doing, and there's fluttery and emotions going on. It's your biology sending you signals. It's something that is challenging, because as we discussed before many times, it's not like we can just get a straight blueprint and say this is what you need to do, because all of us are called to difference. We all have different skills, attributes, and abilities. So there is no just one blueprint. If every person does this, it'll be great, in terms of the specifics of day-to-day life. Now, obviously, there's things like the Benedictine rule that will greatly help, and it will work if you do that. But even within there is room for your personality and your individual choices and selections. It's not just this is what you think on Thursday, this is what you think on Tuesday type thing. This is room for free will and throughout all of us. And I guess within that, there is always the possibility that you're wrong in all of this. I guess that's true with free will, faith, and hope. So going back to one of the key points that you've said here is that this process isn't easy. You've given some examples here of how we can see in others that we're making a difference and doing things well, to kind of exercise a process. We're doing things right. You see a member of Switzerland come up to you that you have no connection with, thanking you for work you've done. There's a lot of great joy in there. It goes, well, this was worth doing that. Because anytime you make a video series, it's not just like, oh, I had this idea, boom, 3 seconds later it exists. It takes some time and some effort. And during that process of making the videos and then training, even though you knew your content was right and it was going to be helpful, similar to the show, you just don't know how it's going to land upon people, because it's an international answer. A lot of this world speaks English. A lot of this world has access to watching videos or listening to podcasts. Will we ever meet someone who profoundly recognizes us, has the courage to talk to us, and then when they do talk to us, has a happy exchange? You add all that up together, that's not exactly common. And how could that not be an example of a crisis incident, as you just said right there? So Father, it's one of these topics that to me is just a lot moving on. Obviously, the gravity of it. I appreciate you helping me both this week and in last week's episode. I want to give you a chance to have any final thoughts that you have about it that we can propel into the future week.
Yeah. Well, thanks for your encouragement, Joe. I really appreciate you, kind of building up the significance of that and the affirmation over the effort invested and seeing the fruits of the labor. It's beautiful. And, it is, you said, how could it not be significant? And I think that's the right attitude. Of course, those things are significant. I'm always sensitive also to, well, the opposite. If I haven't had that experience, does it mean that I haven't invested well? No, we have to be careful not to take the negative side of things. Also, even, I'm very aware of this in terms of homilies. I probably am in dangerous territory saying this to a general population, but the preacher is heavily affected by feedback after Mass. In my personal experience, but in terms of a lot of people I've talked to, and that feedback can be so misleading because basically the homilist usually hears nothing. And so if he hears one thing, it's now an infinite amount more than he normally hears. And you may end up, so you just preach to, say, 500 people. One person tells you one thing and then you take the entire homily to be judged by that one person's feedback. So you also want to be careful about those kinds of things. Somebody might be upset that you said something and they might criticize you. They might also criticize one point of your homily, not commenting on any of the rest of it. And you could end up taking that the whole homily was bad. And number one, it may not have been bad at all. It just rubbed one person the wrong way, reasonably or unreasonably. Secondly, it may have only been one 30 seconds part of that homily that rubbed that person the wrong way. They may have actually appreciated the rest of the homily, and so did the rest of the congregation. So we also have to be a little careful about how we receive some of the feedback or look for some of the fruits of our endeavors. That one bad thing has happened or that there's one bit of negative feedback doesn't therefore make things meaningless or useless or whatever. So again, the most important thing is when we are in a place of peace, when we are in the Lord's presence, when we are hearing him and our heart is moved by him, that's going to be our best access to things that are trustworthy and true. And that's what we call spiritual consolation. That's the place that we really want to cultivate and to listen from. We can't generate spiritual consolation for ourselves. That's a gift from God. But we can dispose ourselves to hear from him rather than allowing our anxiety to run rampant or to get caught in other kinds of energized feedback loops that really are very noisy and make it much harder to hear God in those settings. So we can cultivate the places in which we can hear him best. We can listen for his feedback. We can interact with others to help settle our hearts or to receive feedback from people that we can really trust. That one person says a negative thing about our homily, but our good friend was there who knows how to listen to us and what kinds of things we say, and can say, no, it was actually fine. That person was a little off. Anyway, those can be helpful things to hold on to in the midst of other challenges and trying to read where God is in our lives and our activities.
Well, Father, I don't believe that's just for homilies. I think that people have that effect all over, especially if you're presenting information in any consistent ways. How many people actually consumed it versus how much feedback you get. You go to any YouTube video, it's essentially a pretty strong ratio. Most people will not comment, at least individual people, unique people will not comment relative to the views. So how much did you let that impact you? I think it's a natural thing with human beings there. So with that note, obviously we thank everyone for listening. It's a natural segue to ask for feedback from you guys, the listeners, and good, bad, or ugly. Let us know what it is that you think. You can reach out to us at fatherandjoe@gmail.com with any personal or direct questions, as well as things you wish we would discuss here in future episodes. So we thank you for being with you, and we will be again next week.